Now, friends, we come to the 4th chapter of Leviticus. We've been talking about the 5 offerings that are in these 5 chapters, and we have seen the first 3 offerings. They are called sweet savor offerings. And now we come to the first non-sweet savor offering. The first 3 were the burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering. Now we come to the first of 2 non-sweet savor offerings. The first is the sin offering, and that is sin as a nature. And then we're going to see the trespass offering, and that's sin as an act. You see, man actually is a sinner on 2 counts. He's a sinner by nature, and he's a sinner because of what he does. By the way, he does what he does because he is a sinner by nature. Now, we see here the person of Christ in those first 3 offerings. Now we see the work of Christ on the cross for sin. There are several very striking features about the sin offering that set it apart from the other offerings and distinguish its importance. Now, first of all, I think this is something you can see quite easily. In the burnt offering, there were just 17 verses in that first chapter. In the meal offering, there were 16 verses in the 2nd chapter. The peace offering we saw last time in the 3rd chapter, 17 verses. Now the next chapter, chapter 5, the trespass offering, there are 19 verses. All are just about the same. But do you notice here in the sin offering, 35 verses, more than twice the number of verses in the first 3 offerings. Evidently, the Spirit of God thought this was very important. Now, the sin offering was an entirely new offering. Up to the time of Moses being given the instructions here in the wilderness for this sin offering, there is no record anywhere of a sin offering. There's no previous record of it occurring in Scripture, and no heathen nation had anything that was even similar to it. Now, that in and of itself is quite interesting. Why? Well, this third very interesting thing to note is, from the time of the giving of the law, it became the most important and significant offering of all. You see, man was a sinner before the giving of the law, but actually it was the law that revealed to him he was a sinner. And it was offered during all of the feasts. It became all important. During the time of the Passover, Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles, and it was offered on the great day of atonement, Yom Kippur. It brought the high priest into the Holy of Holies, the sin offering. And then there's a fourth thing that makes it quite remarkable. It's in contrast to the burnt sacrifice, although it was made in the same place. For instance, in the law of the sin offering in Leviticus 6:25, I read, "Speak unto Aaron and his sons, saying, This is the law of the sin offering. In the place where the burnt offering is killed, shall the sin offering be killed before the Lord. It's holy." In other words, actually where the burnt offering leaves off, the sin offering begins. The burnt offering tells who Christ is. The sin offering tells what Christ did. In the burnt offering, Christ meets the demands of God's high and holy standard. In the sin offering, Christ meets the deep and desperate needs of mankind. In the burnt offering, we see the preciousness of Christ. In the sin offering, we see the hatefulness of sin. The burnt offering was voluntary. The sin offering was commanded. The burnt offering ascended. The sin offering was poured out, and that means down. One went up, the other went down. Now, we have here in this chapter, and by the way, it goes into the next one also, we have the sin offering, sin as a nature. And we have in the first 2 verses, sins of ignorance. Then verses 3 to 12, sins of the priests. Then sins of the congregation, 13 through 21. Then sins of the ruler, verses 22 and 26. Then sins of the common people, 27 to 35. And then you have the law of the sin offering over in chapter 6, 24 and 30.